I believe in 2018, you looked at also comorbidities associated with that data, and then you republished that. Why do we think, and question to the general panel here, such a study potentially wasn't revalidated by others? Like, you've published this landmark study, you've found these links. What's causing someone else to doing a revalidation of it?
I think there's so much institutional pressure. I mean, my situation was different, and I had a institution that supported academic freedom, and they said they supported academic freedom to their credit, but they did not have a whole lot to lose by, there aren't bunches of federal grants flowing, through my former institution. And so, but it is a bloodbath. I know several researchers right now that are going through it with their universities. I know several independent researchers, Dr. Peter McCullough, Kevin McKernan, Dr. Sabine Hazan, that are doing groundbreaking work, but retraction has been weaponized against them, basically to sideline them. And into some instances, there are individuals that are throwing these therapeutic interventions that some of them are publishing onto the public domain so they can do the greatest good. But the reason why the retraction occurred was so somebody could instead take the same technology and patent it as somebody else. So these are the things that are going on.
Let's not forget, Brian, that we also have no NIH funding for vaccine safety research for the pediatric schedule, zero, none, zero, ever. That they had cloistered vaccine safety in the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, into a not-for-profit oversight, the kind of like review, professional by the Institutes of Medicine. They're part of the National Academy of Science, to review studies funded by or conducted by CDC on the pediatric schedule because the parents had complained and there were so many lawsuits. And so they would have, had they not violated the mandate of Congress, they would have done a report every 2 years. And they just didn't do it. It was found by Del Bigtree's ICANN organization that they just didn't do it. So why didn't they do it? They didn't do it because they didn't want to know. And there's a pattern here in vaccination during pregnancy. Tom Shimabukuro, we call him the CDC's fixer, would go into the data from the VSD. He'd analyze it and then minimize any harm to the fetus at all, to the point where they stopped looking. But there is like a 4,200% increase in influenza vaccine-related fetal demise that he didn't tell Verback. He hid it, and then parents cornered him and said, where are those data? He pulled out a CD, put it on his laptop, and showed the data. Same thing with RSV, same thing with COVID. Now let me ask you, vaccination in pregnancy really needs to be on the priority of what CDC looks at, or what NIH looks at, what HHS looks at right now.
I think a lot of this comes from the transparency and the lack of transparency inside the institutions. They say they believe in academic freedom. They say they believe in due process when there's an issue involving a scientific integrity. And the public expects that these institutions, if they're built to serve public good, and they say they are, that they're operating with basic constitutional-like protections that we expect. We all learn about free speech in our civics class. We all learn about due process. In reality, what tends to happen in these sorts of investigations, when an issue of a complaint about a topic or a study comes about, is that universities engage their legal teams. The legal team makes a decision about which side to take based on what the interests of the administrator, particularly who called the investigation, and that administrator represents what they say they are, the university, and they are the science, to be frank. And so they make decisions based on these. And so when you're operating under a system that's behaving this way, where you have one person upset with you, can essentially ruin your livelihood and make it hard for you to earn a living in the future. It's very difficult to say anything critical or say anything controversial, to say anything that's outside of what is generally accepted.
I want to weigh in and say that if there's any taboo in science, it's not science. And anybody operating under a partial narrative because they dare not tell the truth are not scientists. And if you apply for NIH grant funding and you bias your language, you bias anything about your grant that says it's commonly known that vaccines don't cause autism or anything like that, you're not really doing due diligence on the facts, and it's fraud. It's a common word. We're going to hear fraud over and over and over again. You cannot defraud the US government for the next 4 years and do something other than science. And so let's be clear that the self-policing, the trying not to piss somebody off because you might lose your career, if that puts you in a position where you feel like you should not talk about it, that's a sure sign you should talk about it.